For that, I put together this presentation. It's not strictly monitoring and debugging. I do talk about a few other techniques that I've got going. First thing I want to talk about is error handling with async await. So how many of you are familiar with async await in JavaScript? Okay, cool. So about half. I'm excited to go into more detail. I threw this in last minute. It doesn't directly have to do with monitoring and debugging, but what I found is that error handling is really a critical part of our of how we monitor. Because in order to monitor errors, for example, we need to be clear about what errors we're monitoring and have a consistent way of logging those errors and thinking about those errors. So what I found and what I'd like to evangelize today is using async await to handle most of your synchronous work. And I think you'll find that it makes error handling significantly easier. And once you handle those errors, you can log them in a consistent way, and then we can monitor those errors in a better way. I'd love for people to fight me on this or offer feedback or pushback as needed, but first I'm going to kind of go into a little backstory about how async await works in JavaScript. So first of all, it's available in Node 8. There's some seats up front here. Async await's available in Node 8. You can use it in older versions with Babel. That's what we were doing, but realistically, it'll ruin your stack traces, and it's pretty hard to use. So I would say use Node 8 and then use async await. It basically eliminates callbacks and promises from any sort of asynchronous transaction or something that you do or service call in Node. Well, it's often referred to as async/await. There's an async function and await keyword. Async functions, as you'll see, they always return a promise, and then the await keyword will pause execution in that async function until the promise resolves. Let me show you an example of that. So here's an async function called getNumber that returns 4. This is functionally equivalent to this function, which returns a promise, which resolves the. So if you want to make a promise really easily, one of the easiest ways to do it is just make an async function and return some data. It's nice. That took me a while to figure out, actually. It took me kind of a long time to realize what was happening. But this is a really cool property because I don't actually like promises by themselves, but once you sort of get all the syntactic sugar that async await provides, they become really powerful and let you build even more interesting abstractions. So using await keyword inside an async function is pretty straightforward. You say await, and then assuming this returns a promise, it will wait until that fetch is complete. Put the value in me. So then, if there's other stuff running, it'll keep running. Once all those calls are done, and then the fetch completes, it jumps back into this function. So it jumps in and out of the function. There's one more seat up here. Sam will probably move his computer. 50 people RSVP'd. We only have 35 chairs, but I didn't want to turn anyone down, and I know there's standing room, so thanks for making use of that. We can put the sodas on the ground and have more seats up in the back rows. The bleachers. So error handling inside of async functions is kind of interesting. If I use the await keyword on a rejected promise or a promise that is rejected at some point, it will throw an error. But it's a little bit different than how we're used to dealing with errors inside of asynchronous JavaScript callbacks. So anyone know what happens if you throw an error inside of an asynchronous callback function in Node, for example? What will happen to your app? 100% of the time. Well, not in a promise, but in a normal callback function situation.
Callback will be called.
Well, that's the proper way to handle it. But if you actually throw an error,
it goes to the runtime, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a catch-all.
So it blows up. I mean, essentially blows up. It'll crash your app. If you have an uncaught exception handler at the top, yeah, there's some standing room there. There's one seat in the front as well. Sorry, I don't have more seats. I couldn't get a bigger room. But with an async function, it's interesting. Async function, if there's anything thrown in there, it actually just kind of bubbles up. So one way that people handle that, I'll show you that in a second. One way people handle errors inside of async function is they'll use try catch. And I think this was initially the pattern that was demonstrated a lot in async await demos. And people were like, ew, try catch. We're not in Java. What's going on? Why am I seeing this again? And I think it turned a lot of people off to async await. But there's actually a different way that you can handle errors, which I think is pretty clever. Because the promise here will bubble up to bad news. If I call bad news again just returns a promise, and it returns a promise, a rejected promise with an error. So if I add a catch to that bad news function, I can catch the error down here. I don't have to put a try catch up there. So if you're familiar with promises, this should look fairly, you should be able to catch this. So here's where it's interesting. The interesting thing is I can, it doesn't matter how many different awaits or async functions that I've sort of nested, it just bubbles up automatically for me. So here I've got my bad news function I call, which is an async function. It calls bad news, which awaits the get news function. The get news function awaits the get from DB function. In this case, the server's down, so it throws an error. And then instead of having to have any specific piping or any try catches in any of these functions, like you would with callbacks, right? I'd have to do like if error, return callback error, and not forget the return, or I'd blow everything up. With this, I don't have to do anything. It throws the error, and then it's caught down there and warned, all because of the nice property of promises that will automatically capture all of your errors. So it's like simplifies and takes all this sort of boilerplate out of having to deal with errors deep in your application. And the other thing that's nice about this is you'll still get like a good stack trace too. If you're dealing with all this stuff, your stack trace is going to be fairly decent. It'll actually show you where everything went. Whereas oftentimes in like a callback-based approach, if you have an error that happens inside of like an asynchronous callback, it might just lose the stack trace. You might just only get like a few things, and it's sort of very difficult to see where you are. So I'm really a big fan of this. So probably thinking, okay, how does this actually help us in our apps? Hey, sorry, no seats, but there's plenty of room on the floor. How can we actually use this stuff in our apps? And let me show you an example of what this looks like. What I figured out is that oftentimes we have this like server.get or server.use. We have like our express kind of syntax here, and then we'll have a route. So what I'm showing here is like an async route or an async middleware. And you await like your get users thing, and then I call res.json. So this works pretty well, except if there's an error. So if there's an error, they're going to bubble up, and server.use doesn't know what to do with that error. And so you're going to get a crash, an unhandled rejection, like you mentioned. And so what you can do is actually this clever thing of creating this error handler. And I'll tell you how this works. I'm going to go through it fast because I don't have a ton of time, but just think about it, and maybe you'll get it. If not, I can go into it more later. So you have this handle error function. It takes in your middleware or your route, and then we return a normal middleware. So remember, like a middleware or a route handler for Express has the rec_res next as the parameters that it takes. So we return a function that's a normal middleware. And what that function will do when it's executed is we call the async middleware, the one that you passed in, except we've attached this catch handler. So if something throws inside of your middleware, of your route, we'll catch it, and we'll just pass that thing over to the error handler, the error handler with Express. Welcome. Sorry, there's only seats on the floor because we had a very good presentation today. We're very excited about it. And I'll tell you what, I only come into the office every like 4 months, and to see people showing up. Talking about async await right now. So that'll forward any errors to the default Express error handler. There's one built into Kraken. Often teams customize it themselves. But with that in place, if you wrap the error handler in this, if you wrap your route in the handle error function, it nicely and neatly takes care of all that stuff. So you can just go about writing your async functions and not worry about anything. But the problem is, and this is like the short version of it. You can write it really terse version if you want, but I'm not going to go into that right now. So here's the thing that we've dealt with in P2P, because I discovered this. I thought async middleware, it's the future. And then like every time, not every time, but like every month, we would push a new route, and someone would forget that that's an async route, and they'd forget to add the error handler. And so what happened is all my great ideas about how to prevent the server from crashing, the servers were crashing more than ever. And so we just get this all the time, unhandled rejection, and like our FCIs were spiking, and our memory was spiking because we're breaking everything, and I'd feel bad because I was telling everyone, use async await, it'll make your stuff better, hey Ethan. And it was just causing crashes all the time. Good job, Jamin. So I made a thing. This is called express and route into async. I forked express and routing. I'm going to bug infra to just take my patch because I think mine's better than default in routing. But this is the part of Kraken that takes our routes and processes them and adds them to express. So what I did, which I thought was clever, is I made it so that anytime you have like a server.get, use, post, put, delete, call, it'll automatically wrap that stuff in our handle error function. So by default, it just will support out of the box async route. So then I can write code like this. I can say, server.get/cards. That should be an async function. It's a typo. I couldn't fix it in time. And I wait get card. And then I can do really clever things here. Like in my get card function, if they're missing a parameter, I can just throw and say, hey, you're missing the ID. We used to not be able to do that very easily. In P2P especially, we'll have like a special type of error object. I don't have time to go into it now, but it might be like a param error or something, where it automatically, like if it has that error type, it'll include a code of like 400, and it'll just automatically kind of handle that those errors. If anything fails with the service score request, and service score now returns promises, that'll automatically bubble up, and it'll all just end up in our error handler to be logged and processed in a nice way. So I've written some blog stuff about this. Getting started with async await, I really recommend it. Move to Node 8, use async await. It will be fabulous for you, and I think you'll like it. So pause there. That was a lot. Any questions? Of course, I'll post them in the JS lunch. I'm sort of hijacking the JS lunch thing that some folks from checkout set up. I'll post it in there and maybe email it out to anyone who are.
I'm assuming, I just saw your slide, so I'm assuming you also handle the controls that are not async in your module? Because the doc catch will throw it.
What did I do wrong? What is it?
The wrapper.
Yeah.
If you're wrapping something that is not async,
yeah,
it's not going to work.
This is the
it's handled, right?
version.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we actually do is we wrap every single middleware in a promise
cool.
dot result. Other question?
Question. So, what version is there?
2 to 3. 2 and 3 both support. However, it's only for PPAS routes. If you're still using the old style routes, they're not gonna like the old service wrappers. I don't think it returns. I don't know.
They can be upgraded if you need to.
There's a fancy way to handle that.
Yeah.
But in general, all the new like service core stuff that uses that dot request instead of the specific methods generally will support. Otherwise, you can use that util that promises a 5 thing as well. Some caveats too. Any other questions? So async await's amazing. You're probably thinking, what should I do this week? Probably port all your callback stuff to async await, and it will make your code simpler, I promise, and it will be easier to read, and the errors will be easier to catch. I'm not even kidding. I love it so much. Okay, how many of you teams are monitoring? Okay, that's it on async await. Anything else?
Just want to add, async await has to be used together. You can't await with anybody.
You can. Not with anything else. Okay, that was the longest part. The rest of these are going to. Client-side error monitoring with FPTI. How many of you are monitoring client-side errors right now in your apps? Cool. How are you doing it?
Beaver logger.
Beaver logger. Okay. And does it get stack traces? Well.
No, it's not for us.
But it'll probably give you like we're having a spike in errors.
Right.
What? Anyone else doing anything else or Beaver logger?
We are doing the same as like.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to show you something different that I think is better, but hopefully we can get them all working together. So I wrote a blog post about this recently. Check it out in the company blog. Blah, blah, blah. It has all the details. So here's the thing. Client-side error monitoring is critical because all of our monitoring stuff that we have, like all the cow stuff and all the alerting stuff, it's all set up around server-based problems. Oh, spike in FCI, spike in 500 errors. But if like the content isn't showing up for a person, and they just like, can't click a button because the React is throwing an error, we don't have any insight into that. And so my hunch, what I figured out, is that probably a lot of users are having really bad user experiences, and our monitoring says that everything is fine, but it's not fine. So I said, started here 4 years ago. This is the first thing I built at PayPal, and it never worked right until a couple of months ago when I actually figured out what was wrong. It's harder than it may seem. So probably everyone's heard of this thing called window.onError. Just nod your head. Yes, of course. Window.onError is a thing that's in browsers. It will trigger a callback when an error is thrown somewhere. And based on the browser you have, it might include a message, URL, line number, column number, or the actual error object itself. So what we did originally for the first 3 years or so that I worked on this was we sort of cleaned up the data a little bit, and then we posted it into Cal. We had a route that posted it to our server, which then forwarded it into Cal. It was something. It gave us basically similar to what you have with Beaver Logger. That's probably what you have is, okay, errors are spiking. Let's do something about it. But the frustrating thing is, once we started getting like everyone basically using new browsers, I was like, where are the stack traces? Because it's all good to say something's broken, but what's broken? Why is it broken? This is what we need to figure out. What we'd see in all of our thing is, for the error message, it would say script error. It turns out that, that what's happening is window.onError doesn't work cross domains. And we store our stuff on a CDN. Isn't that cool? So PayPalObjects.com, CDN, it's like really best practice. But it means that instead of seeing actual errors, we just see script error for everything. So our whole logs are, oh, you had 5,000 script errors yesterday. Oh, perfect, good. What actually went wrong? Oh, we have no idea, sorry. So it turns out that there is a solution to this, which is using cores. So how many of you used cores before, cross-origin resource sharing? You set some funky headers on the thing that's serving up your JavaScript or on a route, and then you can access it across a different domain. I didn't know this was available until like 6 months ago for scripts. So check this out. I figured this out, how this works. I sent it to FPTI, the PA.js people, because every app has PA.js. It's like our tracking thing. So I said, we can just include this in so that everyone can have this for free. So let me show you how it works a little bit quickly. So now that it's included in your apps, in order to turn it on, it's very, very simple. You just need to go paypal.analytics.startClientErrorTracking. You add that to your app, it adds a window.onError handler. It will automatically post things to FPTI. As far as solving the cores problem, the cross-origin resource sharing nonsense, you have to put we had to set up an agreement with the CDN. The CDN, they said, look, if you put your JavaScript in a special folder, they'll add those headers for us. And so I would encourage everyone, if you put your JavaScript in /js/apps, it will be like they'll add the course headers for you. So it's going to be like /hash/js/apps. If you put it inside there like jsappsbundle.js, you're going to get those course headers automatically. You don't have to do anything. You just have to put them in that folder. And then step 3, you have to tell your script tags, okay, cross-origin equals anonymous. This is a little bit interesting. If you add that tag, then your browser will confirm that your script that you're trying to run is sending down those course headers. If it's not sending down the course headers, it won't work. So if you're local, it's fine. There are a few things that trip this up, which I'll talk about in the blog, like if you're on sandbox.paypal.com, because the domain doesn't match HTTPS paypal.com, there are a few like quirks, but in general, it works pretty well. So if you add cross-origin equals anonymous, if your stuff's in the right directory, you'll start to get your stack traces. And if you want to confirm that that's working, you can go in here, like go to your JavaScript file, PayPal objects, WebRes, blah, 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 JS app shared, and check the network tab. You should see like access control, allow headers, allow methods. Those are the cores headers that I'm talking about. Again, I'm going quickly, but I'm hoping I'm just inspiring you about some ideas that you can look into for your app. So once you've done all that stuff, and again, it's only 3 steps. Those 3 steps, add this to your apps. Like tomorrow, go add this stuff to your app. Then you can get stack traces and error stuff through this tool called Kibana. You can also use Grafana, which we'll talk about in a minute. James, he's up in like 2 minutes. Anyway, and you just, for example, for us, we put in this parameter comp : p2p node web and error_type window on error. Of course, you switch the comp value with the value for your app, and then you get stack traces for all the errors. We still get a bunch of script errors. I think they all come from pa.js. I'm going to ask them to add cores on theirs too, so we can get that benefit. But that's monitoring client-side errors. So with this, and I don't know, Ethan, are you here? Have you used this to debug issues, or have you not? You can be honest.
Maybe haven't. But
Cool.
it is great. It really is great.
Yeah. Okay.
A bit unrelated question from an infosec perspective, because I know there are so.
Yeah.
So
Good question.
Went down on all these things. Is there any aspect here as far as PII data thing that could potentially go in there, and if so, is there any process for them scrubbing or?
You're trying to shut me down, Ohad?
No.
I just messed
trying to hook you up with someone who can help you there.
Be prepared.
Um,
So what we'll see here is our code. So it's a good question. I think everything we're going to see is where in our code were they.
as long as that doesn't capture the payload or the
Doesn't
content of
capture
the
their
field.
payload. It'll capture where they like what URL they're on, the like the FPTI page name. But it's all stuff that I mean
So it gets scrubbed at FPTI, right? I assume.
FPTI does actual scrubbing.
And I could see the edge case where it uses data which would be sensitive error, but without context, so you wouldn't.
Be hard to.
So,
to
for
tie.
example, cannot read property, some of undefined, but you don't know that it's an account. Some other item you just don't know. It might actually something sensitive. You just don't know. So
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So there's a possibility. In the most parts, it looks like cannot execute method replace or e.replace is not a function or something generic and JavaScript specific. But that's a great call.
Is
So
that different than
Well, FPTI collects very specific keys.
Yeah,
that
so
are-
we
so
piggybacked
they're
on
sort of
existing
do that
keys.
to make sure that they collect data that's relevant.
great.
Why is it better than posting to a log route?
Oh well, two reasons. The thing is, it is posting to log route, but there's less. So the way that we used to do it is we capture from window down on error, we post it to our app, which then posted it to Cal. This goes directly into FPTI. We don't have that additional step, so it's one less point between the actual error and the data because it doesn't have to jump to our server. So the reason why it was especially annoying is because we actually abstracted out the old thing that posted to Cal into its own little npm module, so you'd have to like pull that npm module into your app to add additional routes into your app. And it turns out if you can just post directly, because FPTI lives on PayPal.com, we can just post directly there. We can just get that data directly without having to go jumping into our server and add special routes.
point out two more past having set things up like this. When you accidentally publish a broken code and it's deployed to thousands of people, and all of those errors beating up your service, which may not actually be, might be something that is just informational. And
React
good to go.
warning messages.
But now
or-
you're taking down your entire site, your whole app, because of some little error. So having that endpoint that accepts these logs separate from your actual application and business logic, I'm glad that we have this model.
That was so much better said than whatever I said. Thank you, Aaron. That was great. So any other questions about this? I just like the last two things, like the async await and the client-side error handling, I think are so important. And you can use them today. Like there's nothing stopping you. This is only 3 steps. I'll talk better about how to graph it with Grafana and other tools, but I really think it's worth investing in. Any other questions?
This is pretty cool. We're trying to adopt it. What about scripts loaded dynamically from the client-side route? So if we append a script once our page is loaded, like using require, something like that.
Yes,
Can
yes,
you
yes,
add
yes.
that anonymous tag, or do you know how that works?
Are you using required.js?
Something like it. I forget exactly what it is, but it's a similar function. It dynamically appends scripts to your header.
I mean, it may be, assuming the script is also on the CDN, which I guess it probably is.
Yeah, it's good.
Presumably you'll need to, this is a fairly new thing in browsers. I doubt require.js being an older tool would have that support,
Yeah,
but it's
again,
likely you
not
could
required,
follow.
but it's
Or-
any.
or whatever tool it is, or even if it's Webpack or something like that, I bet it will require a little bit of, you might have to file an issue, but it's not hard to add a thing. You could, presumably you'll probably have to file a pull request.
Okay.
I doubt it'll be impossible. Yep.
Are you, obviously not every error, but in some cases, those errors could be correlated to a backend or backend.
Yeah.
Are you taking the correlation ID or session ID or any other key
We're
there
not doing
and
anything.
log it in there to allow stitching there?
Yeah. So we often find that there's a correlation between errors on the server and errors in the client side. Usually, if there's something wrong on the server, there's also an error on the client side that happens. As far as like stitching them, we get a correlation ID, which is basically worthless because the correlation ID only exists for this request. But there are other tools we can use, like the user GUID. User GUID usually persists between Kibana and Cal pretty well. So we get the user GUID or some other thing we can search on, and then we can see what else is happening. But we, to be honest, what we've done so far is not very sophisticated.
The cal logging that you have added for my account / some error,
Yeah.
that actually helps with the correlation. So if you're debugging something, you see the post to that error route, and then you can look for in this tool what's going on.
Yeah, so one of the things that I don't have a slide on is something I worked with OHAD on for a couple months was figuring out how to get FPTI data to show up in Grafana, which is our main tool. The next thing we're going to talk about actually is Grafana dashboards for monitoring apps. But before I get started on that, any last questions about client-side monitoring? Yes, sir. What's your name?
Arsenic.
Arsenic.
So for the client-side tracking, this is assuming it's in PayPal. If I'm serving a bundle file from the server-side rendering universally, right? That won't. You can't use this path in order to get client-side.
You won't. No, it'll work better. You won't have to deal with any of the core stuff. It'll just work out well. I mean, you still have to enable the window.onAir tracking, but outside of that, as long as you have p.js, you only need that extra stuff, moving stuff around if it's being served on a different domain name. Where this is problematic is if you're on like a website like PayPal.me or something with a diff which doesn't have www.paypal.com. The course headers right now are only set up to allow they'd only infosec people would only let me. I wanted to do star there, so anyone serving up the JavaScript would get errors, but they only wanted to allow it. Okay, so let's talk about Grafana. And I know we're going fast, but it's like there's so much cool stuff, and I only have an hour, so we just gotta go fast. How many of you? What are people using to monitor their Node apps? Raise your hand. Call it out. Whatever. Sherlock. Okay. Is anyone using Grafana at all? What?
Zoom.
Okay. So checkout's using Grafana. What benefits do you see with Grafana over Sherlock? Or why do you like it over Sherlock?
I like that all the data is there. You've been able to evaluate.
Yeah. So Grafana is a tool provided by Sherlock. It looks something like this. Every team has access to this stuff. And it allows you to create custom dashboards for your specific app. So this is the one we have for P2P Node Web. Here's our client-side errors over count. You can have like this week versus last week, compare those. So when there's like a deploy, you can easily see, okay, it's spiking up and help you decide about a rollback situation. You can see total counts, status 1, status 2s. And it's like once you get your basic Grafana dashboard set up, it's very easy to add each route that matters to you and a bunch of interesting information, FCIs and all this stuff, so that you have we use this. Ethan, would you say we pretty much use this as our main thing rather than Sherlock? James set this up over the course of a couple of months, but now that we sort of understand how it works, we find it very easy to spin up new dashboards. And he's going to do a little demo and talk a little bit more about how this works.
Sure. Okay, so we spent a lot of time really thinking about, what does it mean to have a healthy app and which metrics are really the best proxy for what is a healthy app. So in our case, we looked at our most important routes, which is the get funding instruments route on the send money app. So you send money on PayPal.com, that's what you see. So first, it tries to get funding instruments, which is your cards and bank accounts. Then when you send money to somebody and when you request money, and then we have our client's error count. For us, we found it the most useful to have our status 0, 1, and 2, and then the total count of previous weeks. So we see if there's a major deviation here. We are dropping traffic, things like that. Any questions so far about this? Okay.
What else is there, Jameis? What else? What other magic do you hold in Grafana?
And like you said, here it's really useful. We would do a deploy and we would see a strong deviation occasionally, which would tell us that we broke a bunch of client-side stuff. And before we had this, we really didn't know if we broke something. One time we broke all of the content for non-English speaking countries, and it took us a day to find out. So it was not great. One of the reasons why we invested in stuff like this. One thing that we also invested in quite heavily is restarts.
Why do they all say NA?
Because we don't have any restarts
Because we don't
right
have
now.
any restarts, suckers.
Okay, who here has app crashes? Who here does not have app crashes?
No, I'm just
Okay,
kidding. We do actually.
there's like
sometimes.
2 people raise their hand for both questions. So you
Everyone is
have no app crashes?
There's a Grafana dashboard that Node Info maintains that shows everyone's app crashes. We could go to it right now and shame everybody. But
Okay, so app crashes is a very strong proxy for app health, right? Because you know something's falling over. If that increases, it's going wrong. This, in my opinion, should be default. One of the default metrics that all the Node apps have, but we don't have that. So it took us a little bit of work. We figured out how to get app crashes here. So when we have app crashes, it shows up here. Well, now we don't have any, so yes.
Sling slot P2P response code last news like.
Why is it this big drop at the end?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Great question.
the site's up there.
the data source we're using, which is Cal Reports, which is in Hadoop, I think. It's a little bit delayed by like 15 or so minutes. At the end of the graph, you see data just drop off.
What you have there is basically what you're looking at is count. So it's not a metric, either it's there or it's not, but Sherlock or Cal in this case actually aggregates. So if you don't put what we do it on Sherlock displays and projectors, we put a band at the end, say, drop the last 3 minutes or drop the data from the last minute, because that data is partial. It's just starting to aggregate that data because data gets from all hosts. So what you'll see in custom projectors, you'll see a confidence bound at the end, or even cleared out the last minute or two of that thing. So
Okay, so great question. In short, the data isn't there yet. Yes?
You said it took some. Sorry. You said it was some difficulty to log your restarts.
Just
Yeah.
finding out what the metric was. So one of the big issues with metrics here at PayPal is discoverability. So we know the data is there somewhere, but actually getting to it. I spent a few months just tracking down where all the data is, and we're getting better at that. But
Do you have documentation for that? Because that sounds like it would be useful.
He's like, give me that information.
we're working on that.
Okay,
So
cool.
we're working with these guys to set up a baseline of like, these are the 20 metrics that all Node apps want and need. Here's how you add them easily.
Nice.
Great question. Thank you. Okay, so then here we have some more stuff. Oh, wrong. This is kind of our hacky solution to say which build is currently live. So when we do a deploy, you'll see half this graph will switch to the next build ID. So that's how we can see what the saturation of which build is during a deploy. Here's our distribution by colo. So we can see right now it looks like we're serving traffic on 5 AZs right now. Kind of nice to see, when things are switching
This
around.
is probably all in Sherlock somewhere, but I can never figure it out. And so being able to service the things that are most important to us is really helpful. And so, yeah, I think this is great for Node teams, especially. Like Jameis said, we're going to be trying to figure out what's the minimum set of data that actual Node teams need, and maybe find a way to just generate those dashboards for you. Or something.
Yeah. So here we added a little more things, but here we just added our FCI total count because that's a big deal. This one's been really helpful, just the slingshot 245XX week over week, so we can see where there's deviations there. And then we have our FCI count by URL, which has also been
Mess with your VGA stuff, so
yes,
it's
okay.
ready for you to do.
Thank you. And then this shows us what our most important URLs are. This one I like a lot.
What is that one, James? I haven't seen that one
I know, it's new.
The URLs. Like,
Oh.
it's by account.
Nifty.
Dude, you gotta read our emails.
Okay, now this will work because of the SSO issue. Okay, so he showed the FPTI data. So here we are fetching the top server errors, which occur because of an AJAX call. So we'll work on getting this as a proper number, but basically this is our top 10 server errors that are caused by AJAX calls. So in our app, for the last 15 minutes, our most important one, or our highest count, one is error payment denied. So this is kind of a nice way for us to see, and we're going to make this look nicer, but we just did a push. All of a sudden, this number spiked, or we see a different distribution. Any questions? Okay.
A couple months ago, I said, hey, I'm sick of going to Kibana to get my client-side errors. And I talked about how important client-side errors are. And so I said, hey, how about we get FPTI data in Grafana? So I can just have one place to look at all my stuff. And they worked really hard, but immediately, Stan and Ohad and everyone agreed that it was a good idea and worked with the search team and everyone else that had access to the data to figure out what needed to happen to make it happen. And they were able to help us. And now you can see in Grafana, I can very easily see the top JavaScript errors. These are like the error messages coming from those stack traces. Errors on pages, like if payment couldn't be received, like things that cause 400 errors basically. And then the chart, really easily I was able to do that in Grafana with like 2 or 3 little lines of like Elasticsearch search code. So I'm really happy about that. Just we'll say grateful for their team for being willing to work with us to add that data source that wasn't there before.
How would you go about breaking up this data by country? Like, for example, like maybe US FI failure.
Yeah, so you can, I don't know. You can add, I have ideas, but I don't know. Like, you can easily do a separate graph per country. And there's a thing at the top, which we don't have in this graph, but you can sort, like, for example, by colo or split and different dimensions. But you probably have to manually add in.
And it also depends on so it depends on the source. Some sources have a top-end function. Where you can, if you have a key of a country, you can do a top-end, sort of top countries, etc. But I would say it depends on the source of that.
Yeah. So Druid if the data is in it, Druid can do it. So if it's in Druid, it's really easy. Some of the other things, I would imagine ES supports grouping as long as there's a country dimension available in the data set.
Oh, yeah, I just see if do they have the top end? Elastic.
There's a country.
No, you can do it.
Okay, we've got about 12 minutes left, so I'm just.
We actually have the room the entire day, so if you want to stay through lunch, let's go over. We're going to talk about stage debugging.
We're going to lock the doors, and you may not leave.
So your dashboard is.
Okay, so we're going to spend. Any more questions about this?
Nope.
Okay, we're going to spend the next 12 minutes or so talking about Node Inspector and how to use that on stage. Is anybody dying for anything besides that, or is that good with everybody?
Ethan, you can get your Bastion hit.
Okay. All right. So, who here was at the consumer hackathon where I showed this? Nobody? Great. Okay. Not even Sam was there. I saw you there. Okay. So, how many have used the Chrome DevTools before to pause JavaScript? Okay, great. So, basically, we're talking about how to do this on the Node side. So, it can be a little bit tricky. Who here has felt the pain of debugging on stage or in prod? Yes, okay. Very painful, right? Okay, so
they didn't have Vim on the Genesis instance.
It's VI. Yeah. Well, anyway. So what I'm about to show is a demo of how you can use the Node Inspector to debug the Node process that's on stage and also locally. So
can you zoom a little bit?
Yes, I will zoom a little bit. So we added Okay, so here's our stage instance. I'm going to log in real quick. Okay, so for our app, and we added about 10 lines of code to enable this. We're planning on making it a module if you want it sooner. Bug Jamin, because he handles our backlog. Okay, so we added this debug endpoint, which says, here, follow these steps. You want to do this the first time. So we'll go to these steps.
You zoom again?
Yes. Can everybody see that? Okay, so basically, let me explain what's happening here before we do it. So V8 is the JavaScript runtime that runs in Node and in Chrome. That runs the actual JavaScript. V8 has a debugger server, a debugger instance, a debugger in there. So if you attach a client to that debugger, it'll say, okay, now I'm going to let you do things like pause the process, inspect things like that. So what we need to do is we need to tell the Node process to turn on the debugger, and then we need to connect our Chrome DevTools, the client, to that debugger server, essentially. Does that kind of make sense? Any questions? Okay. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to get the IP address of the actual process running inside Genesis. So the way you do that now in Stage with Genesis is you go in here to View Instances, you open this dropdown, and then here there's a pod IP. We need the whole thing. And these steps are all documented here on this page, which is where that module is going to live. So then there's a fancy Chrome inspect. This is one of the Chrome tabs. And once you do this the first time, it'll be easier. But basically, you say, try and connect to this server at this address, and the port is always going to be 9229, which is there. So it's now trying to talk to the Node server with the client. So now we're going to open our dedicated DevTools for that. So now here, I should have disconnected it first. Okay, so the first time you come here, you'll see this. Then this simply executes a little bit of code that we have at the debug route that says turn on the debugger and start listening for incoming connections. So since we opened that and the client is trying to talk to it, you see immediately pops up. We now have node domain and file over here. And over here we have the node process running at this file system location, which is inside of the Docker container.
Whoa, so good.
All right, so let's actually do something fun and set some breakpoints.
That is really fun. How about conditional break?
Yes, we can, but we'll go simple first. This is a live demo. So over here, under no domain, you can see all of the native JavaScript Node module that Node loads. And if you want to learn about how Node does FS under the hood, this is a great place to start. And then under the file, you see all of our P2P Node Webs apps, the files there. You can even dive into the Node modules. So a lot of cool stuff. So we will start with something simple. Let's see if we can close this. And there's even a fancy file opener thing. We'll do controllers, helper, index. So immediately here we see one thing to keep in mind is there's the SM version. Does anybody know what that stands for? Source maps. Thank you. So you have the source map version and you have the normal version. This is a little bit tricky, and you won't have to deal with this unless you run Babel or compile stuff on the server, which we do. And so you set breakpoints using the source map version, but if you change the code, you do it to the non-source map version. So let's start with the source map version here. And I'm going to set a breakpoint here on get page name, which should be executed on every page load. And then we're going to refresh the server here. Okay, so it immediately paused it here. We now have access to rec, to base URL, and you can go over here to the console. You can see that it console logs some things. It doesn't console log everything, but it console logs a bunch of stuff. If you want to execute code in the context of that function, you can open up rec. Really powerful for quickly seeing what's going on here on the staging environment. So,
and just to point out, that's exactly the reason why we can't have this on prod right now, because it's all the raw information. So technically, it's possible. I mean, this approach could work on prod. We haven't figured out what to do with security yet. Aaron and I were and Jameson were all sort of fighting over this. He was like, "This is totally insecure." We're like, "But it'd be so cool to debug this way." Like,
Isn't there I read about this a little bit. Isn't there a bit of a performance hit doing this?
That's a great question. I asked the VA folks on this. So with certain parts, there is. So I would do this. We're doing it mainly staging. Obviously, we're pausing the process here, which means if anybody's trying to load this page, it's not going to work, right? So if you do this on prod, I would only do this on a box you've pulled out of rotation.
Like a smoke box.
Right.
Then you can modify the code, but anyway, we're not doing that in prod. Okay, so then we talked about actually modifying the code. So, we can inspect this here. We can see the call stack. We can watch certain variables. You can see everything that's in scope here, which is, super useful, right? So then let's actually modify the code. We go to the non-source map version. So what if we think this code is broken and it actually should be RE instead? So let's save it. And then we'll refresh.
Cool, that worked.
Okay, so something broke. I'm not sure if that's what we expected to happen, but we're chaos engineering here, so that's good. Okay, so
SVG images.
What happened is there's an error here, but it threw and then it caught. So we can come over here, we can say pause on exceptions, and then we can pause on caught exceptions.
Is that saved to the file system on your stage?
Yep.
Yes. Well, no. It doesn't save to the file system. It saves to the running. It modifies the running code, so it's hot swapping the code.
Okay.
So if you restart the process, it'll reset.
Gotcha.
Exactly right. Okay, so here it paused now. Pause on promise rejection. RE is not defined. So even though here it's showing that it's rec because this is a source map version, so there's a little bit of brittleness there. If you want here, you can change it, and then you can hover over it, and then it shows it appropriately. And then whether we change it here actually doesn't matter. We need to change it over here in this one because it's the non-source map one. So what we've done here, so this gives you a very fast and easy way to test out changes in stage. If you want to test out a fix, you can't test it out locally because of certain environment. We run into this situation all the time. Any questions on this? Yeah.
So when you hit first time the URL, the debug slash, did you do anything on server side or? So if I want to configure my app to debug, what should I do?
Yes. Do you have it here locally?
So first of all, use Node 8. How many of you are using a version before Node 8? So 4 or 6? Okay. So definitely recommend upgrading. First of all, I'll just say, when we upgraded to Node 8, all of our routes saw 250 millisecond performance improvement. All of our server rendered routes. So it's definitely great for perf. But also great for adding cool features like this. Yeah.
What are you transpiling for on your server if you're on Node 8? A lot of people were doing that for.
Yeah. So we just had it in there. Right now we use flow type, and which gives us type checking, which I really love. I'd love to have presented on that, but I just didn't have time. And we're still using ES6 modules on there. Node 8 doesn't properly support them, but it will someday. And when it does,
basically it's this line of code. So
to add debugging.
Yeah. So we plan on making this a node module that you can just pull in to make things easier. And then something important to remember is to fix your code afterwards or restart your process because it'll stay broken if you don't. And another important thing kind of to remember is if it only allows one debugger instance connected at a time.
This is actually one of the trickier bits.
Yeah, and so if you're connected and your coworker tries to connect as well, there's going to be some conflict there. So we added a disconnect button here. Oh, see? Now it's trying to load, but it's broken and repaused, so we need to actually jump over here and...
Speaking of performance hit.
Yeah, exactly. So now we will resume execution. Okay, so we just added this here, which basically just makes it disconnect and asks you to disconnect the client. So there is a little bit of quirkiness around it, but I try to have some clear instructions, and I ordered this a certain way, which has turned out to be the most reliable way in doing this, but it seems to be fairly reliable now.
So I'm going to push, I'm going to talk to some people in Node Infra and say, hey, is this something that should just be built into like PayPal eyes? I really think it should be. Every team needs better debugging on staging. Why not just include it by default? So I'm going to start that conversation with Aaron.
Yes.
Good, I got approval. So probably we need to work on the PR. Jameis, what was your next steps? We have something in our backlog to work on this. Can you describe what you're planning to do next on this?
Publish this as a node module so you can pull it in easily into your app, basically.
Yeah. So either we'll make a node module and document it nicely and write a blog post about it.
Yeah, that's the
with pictures.
I think that's what he was looking for.
Yeah, and then
Look,
or we'll just get it built into like PayPal.
The pictures are here at the bottom.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
We'll get a designer on that debug page too to make it look a little nicer.
Nah, it looks fine.
It says the Sherlock guy.
That's right. Hey, I'm you. Don't blame me.
Any questions about this? Good? Great? Yeah?
This is, you know what, actually, never mind.
Okay.
Just ask. Come on, I'm waiting for your question.
Well, I'm sure everyone knows I'm still kind of new. How do you detect the staging? So I think this would be fairly easy to set up. I've read about it before, but I don't know how to tell the difference between production and staging, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
you
an
want to answer
environment.
that? There's a thing called environment PayPal, a module Node Infra provides, and you can just say like it's staging. So we actually have the module that we'll produce on this. We'll have the check for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You just turn it on, and it will be available. We could also just enable it. Yeah. So he explicitly just disables it in prod.
Would it be better to make it some kind of build time thing that happens so that you don't have even the code in the code at all, and have this in there in any way?
We'll solve that later.
We'll figure out the right thing.
Could it be in the CI process somehow?
Yeah, we could use a Babel plugin.
Well, you can use the config.json file.
I don't like magic like that, but because it explodes in your face in random ways. But that's a good idea.
I just don't like having it in there at all, because what if your branching fails somehow?
What if your build?
What if your build branching fails, right?
Yeah, well,
I would rather have this fail than my build branching fail, but anyway.
Oh yeah. Something to consider. Yeah, good thoughts, Stan.
Okay, I think we're done.
We're totally out of time. Thank you so much for coming. Big round of applause for.
Ping James with all your questions.
Yep, ask me all your questions. We've got a video that we're making of this. We'll see if Jameis and I can combine our videos to like one mega video and share that out. We had 3 other slides.